I'll check if you know Natalie Young's Shirul Adonai.
When's that from?
Natalie Young Shirul Adonai.
Oh, but is it older or more contemporary?
She's about 15 years ago.
try it with me. Shiru l'Adonai, shir chadash, shiru l'Adonai, kol haaretz, shiru l'Adonai, shir chadash, shiru l'Adonai, kol haaretz, shiru l'Adonai, shir chadash, shiru l'Adonai, kol haaretz.
Shabbat Shalom. You know, as I think you get older, your perspective on time changes a little bit. Earlier, the Cantor had asked, she said, got together with some fellow students and we were talking about some melodies from the 80s. I was wondering if you would recognize them. And at this point, the 80s, that's not that long ago. I mean, on the one hand, it's 40 plus years ago. But the 80s, I mean, I became a rabbi, was ordained in the 80s. I got married in the early 80s. And so perspective on time starts to change, and was in a meeting this week, and a young person said, we're almost done with the first quarter of the 21st century. And it's like, what? Wow. But stop and think about it. This is 2022, and they had a point. So time goes on, but perspective is different. And so we will feature a number of melodies that come out of the 1980s. I am sure that many of you will remember these from this congregation or other congregations that you may have been part of at that time. As a matter of fact, as we go to the Lecha Dodi, the welcoming song of Shabbat on page 20, let's see if you remember this very upbeat and joyous melody. עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה
ובצהלה,
תוך אמוני עם סגולה.
בואי
חלה,
בואי חלה, לה 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 לחנותי, לה 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 לקראת כלה, לה 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 פני שבת נקבלה, לה 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 לחנותי, לה 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 לקראת כלה, לה 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 פני שבת
We remain standing for our call to worship, the Baruch Hu, page 28. Please be seated. There is one who sings the song of his own life, finding everything within himself. There is one who leaves the circle of herself and sings the song of her people. There is one whose voice rings with the song of humanity, hoping for the highest perfection. And there is one who rises even higher, uniting with all creatures, with all worlds, filling the universe with song. Nivarech, let us bless. On page 33, as you taught Torah to those whose names I bear, teach me Torah too. Its mystery beckons, yet I struggle with its truth. You meant Torah for me. Did you mean the struggle for me too? Don't let me struggle alone. Help me to understand, to be wise, to listen, to know. Lead me into the mystery. Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael. Let's join together in the Shema, page 34.
Shema
Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Vaed. Ve'ahaveta et Adonai Elohecha
בכל לבבך ובכל
ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך והיו
הדברים
האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך
וקשרתם לאות על ידיך
היו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם
על מזוזות
ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו
ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים
לאלוהיכם אני
אדוני
אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים
אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
We'll be singing our next prayer, the Michamocha, on page 40, again to a melody from the 80s. But to say this is a golden oldie is a bit of a misnomer. The prayer itself has been sung by the Jewish people for 3,000 years, and this melody is about 40 years old.
Maybe even older,
A little older, maybe.
but not מסיני. מי כמוך בעלים אדוני, מי כמוך נהדר בקודש נורא נורא, נורא תהילות, עושה ופלא. מי כמוך בעלים אדוני, מי כמוך נהדר בקודש נורא נורא, נורא תהילות, עושה ופלא. מלכותך ראו בניך, בוקר היום לפני משה ומרים, זה לי ענו ואמרו. מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נהדר בקודש נורא נורא, נורא תהילות, עושה ופלא. אדוני ימלוך לעולם, ימלוך לעולם וימלוך, ימלוך לעולם, לעולם ועד. מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נהדר בקודש נורא נורא, נורא תהילות, עושה ופלא.
Seems like the 80s, or at least the songs we're doing, was a swinging time, for sure. I remember a young singer-songwriter was really taking the reform movement, the conservative movement, by storm in the 80s when he began his career. His name was Craig Taubman, and the next prayer is one of his enduring pieces, enduring legacies that we've been singing for a long time. His melody to the Hashkivenu prayer on page 42.
That's timeless, right? Hashkivenu
Adonai Eloheinu leShalom
ve'hamidenu
Reinu leChayim Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leChayim
ושמור צאתך
Baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom aleinu v'al kol amo Yisrael v'al Yerushalayim. You know, not a service passes that we don't incorporate at least one, usually multiple melodies of Debbie Friedman. Now, she began actually to make her mark in the 70s already, the late 70s, but she really rose to fame in the 80s as well. And she actually really got her start here in New Jersey, in southern New Jersey, in a congregation in Mount Laurel, which was one community over from where I lived in Cherry Hill. And the rabbi who hired her, now deceased in Mount Laurel, would tell me that it was probably the best thing he ever did in all his years in the rabbinate. We continue with Vishamru, page 44.
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם, ברית עולם ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת שבת ויהי נפש, שבת שבת ויהי נפש, שבת שבת ויהי נפש. אותי
A thought before the Amidah. It's actually at the very bottom of page 47 from Nachman of Bratslav, the great Hasidic Rebbe. Every word of one's prayer should be like a rose that is picked from a bush. One gathers rose upon rose until a bouquet is formed and can be offered to God as a beautiful blessing. For the Tefillah, Amidah, page 46, we rise.
אדוני שפתי תפתח ופי יגיד תהילתך. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, ואלוהי אבותינו ואימותינו, אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי יצחק, ואלוהי יעקב, אלוהי שרה, אלוהי רבקה, אלוהי רחל, ואלוהי לאה, האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, גומר חסדים טובים וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני אל, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, צומח נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומידו מלך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיה הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
Please be seated. Let's read together on the top of page 55. May these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day. And may this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat. If what the officials of our government are saying is true, the prospects of a war between Russia and Ukraine is imminent. We hope, of course, that proves not to be the case. But as we raise our prayers of peace this evening, we certainly focus those prayers on that troubled part of the world. Shalom Rav, page 60.
Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha tasim le'olam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha tasim le'olam. Ki ata hu melech adon lechol hashalom. Ki ata hu melech adon lechol hashalom. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha tasim le'olam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha tasim le'olam. וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל.
Now, after the Amidah, our thoughts turn to our loved ones in need of healing, be this a healing of body or a healing of soul, thinking especially in our extended congregational family of Laura McDaniel and Earl Ziff. Today is Earl's 65th birthday, so we also send Earl healing wishes and birthday wishes as we join together in the Misha Barak prayer. For our moment of silent reflection, we also recognize the civil holiday that this weekend is part of, President's Day on Monday. We do pause to give thanks to our leaders. We know from the Torah portion of this week and from our own historical experience that leaders make mistakes. All leaders actually make mistakes. But our very first president did so much to set the course of this nation, including the fact that when his term was up, he insisted on stepping down and making sure there was an orderly transfer of power that is the hallmark of democracy. So we pause in gratitude for leaders that have bettered our lives and preserved what we value so much. You know, growing up in the 70s and 80s as a teen and then as a young man, I was one of these very socially conscious types, and I belonged to a lot of organizations. I would send in my $10 or my $20, and I was a member of Save the Wildlife and all these environmental organizations and a number of political organizations as well. And one of them that meant a lot to me and did such important work was Amnesty International. You know, and I would get the stickers from them and I would put it on my notebook or whatever. And Amnesty International was a great organization. It was established in 1961, and in 1977 it won the Nobel Peace Prize. It had what we called the prisoner of conscience designation, and it worked for international human rights and bringing to light forgotten political prisoners in all corners of the world. It reached its zenith in the 1990s, where it had over 7 million members and chapters in 150 countries. So when controversy erupted last week regarding Amnesty International, you know, it hit me hard. I took it personally because I've respected and supported this organization for so many decades. So what was the brouhaha? And is it a tempest in a teapot or something worse? As you may have seen, Amnesty International released a major report calling Israel an apartheid state. It's actually not the first organization. The first organization to use that word is actually an organization in Israel, the far left, called B'Tselem.
These guys.
But they're the Human Rights Watch. But when Amnesty International releases a report and uses that word, people notice all over the world. I've read a whole bunch about the controversy in my rabbinic listservs and in some of the major newspapers and the like. The best statement that I found about this whole affair actually came from the Reconstructionist movement. It was pointed out to me by a Reform colleague. I have ties going back a long time with the Reconstructionist movement, feel close to them, always have, and actually for 7 years served in the only congregation in the country that was dual affiliated, Reform, Reconstructionist. So I borrow and will quote from their statement. And they begin their statement by saying, apartheid is one of the most shocking words in the English language, conjuring images of the brutal and racist South African regime that decades of struggle brought to an end in the mid-1990s. When we hear the word apartheid, that's what we think of. Technically, the term can refer to any regime that discriminates and segregates based on race. Why was I so upset? I read Amnesty International's entire report. When it comes to Israel, you've heard me hold forth many a time. You've heard me criticize policies of the Israeli government. But I've always insisted, and especially when it comes to speaking about Israel in public, statements have to be balanced. If they're not balanced, there's something wrong. If you harp and focus only on what is wrong, without saying what is right, you have to call that kind of statement into question. And even though Amnesty International said that they were not equating Israel with apartheid South Africa, actually, that's what they do. But what, first of all, was missing in this statement? Two things were missing in this statement. The first was any declaration and recognition of Israel's basic right to exist. Any historical context about why Israel was established, what it meant, how it saved millions of Jews, and what it means to the Jewish people. Nothing about that. Straight to the apartheid regime in the territories, in the occupied territories of Israel. As the Reconstructionist statement said, Amnesty's report claims that from its founding, Israel's efforts to ensure a Jewish majority within its boundaries were inherently discriminatory and fostered an apartheid system. The report emphasizes the ways in which Israel's creation has been catastrophic for Palestinians, including Israel's policy of designated lands previously owned by Palestinians as abandoned and then claimed by the state, and its refusal to readmit Palestinian refugees from the 1948 war. The report calls for a total and unrestricted right of return for all Palestinian refugees and their descendants. That is basically saying the Jewish state has no place. That's not recognizing the necessity and the historical validity of a Jewish state called the State of Israel. It goes on to say that Israel should not be recognized diplomatically, or at least should be criticized for all of its policies that continue to segregate and discriminate against Palestinians, and essentially is giving a carte blanche to the BDS movement, which does not distinguish between illicit behavior perhaps in the territories and Israel's basic functioning as the only democracy in the Middle East. It says, the report by the Reconstructionist movement, problematically, the Amnesty International report downplays the ways in which Israel's creation provided refuge and saved the lives of many of the world's most desperate Jews in the immediate aftermath of the Holocaust. It does not address the historical reasons why Jews have needed refuge from systematic and recurring anti-Semitic violence in many parts of the world to this day, nor does it address the existential threats that Israel has faced and continues to face today. What I respect about the Reconstructionist report on Amnesty International statement is that it does go on to say, at the same time, we cannot ignore or dismiss the report's documented examples of systemic Israeli human rights abuses, especially relating to the now 54-year-old occupation, which our movement, the Reconstructionists, has opposed for decades. And I'll remind you that the reform movement for several decades now has gone on record supporting a two-state solution. But the thrust of the Amnesty International report is not support for a two-state solution. It's support for a one-state solution that is not a Jewish state any longer. I agree with the Reconstruction assessment. We can't absolutely deny the validity of any criticism of Israel. You've heard me say that before, and I'm saying it again. It's our responsibility as Jews, just like there are many Israelis who call out what they perceive to be injustices within the Green Line of Israel and beyond. But to use terminology and to level that criticism in the unbalanced way that calls into question the motives, I think is a grievous error by a political organization that has done so much good and earned so much respect. You know, I fear that many Jews will now say with Amnesty International and won't recognize the important work that they and other human rights organizations do. My last thought is that we know that words matter. By choosing a sensationalistic word, yes, they've captured attention. And yes, they've created controversy if they wanted to do that. But the responsible way to go about this is to highlight the injustices, but doing so in the context of recognizing Israel's right to exist, recognizing all that is right and democratic about the state of Israel, but nevertheless saying Israel can do better and should. How long have we been stuck now with the fact that Israelis and Palestinians are not at the negotiating table? You know, the Oslo Accords, that wasn't the 1980s, it was the 1990s, but that's a long time ago. What has been accomplished since Oslo and the dream of Oslo, which was the closest we've come? And then there was Rabin's assassination, and it seems like everything has been stuck in time since then. The way to get the parties back to talking to each other and trying to figure out what the next step will not be to denigrate the existence of the other side, not to completely paint them as completely evil or wrong. There are grievous mistakes that are being made and injustices by the Palestinians to their own people and toward Israel. And at the same time, the Israeli occupation is not sustainable. Amnesty International, you've really let me down. You disappointed me. I've supported you since I was a kid, since I wrote out my $10 checks and became a member in the 70s and 80s. Use your stature to advance peace. Shabbat shalom. As we open our ark, our beautiful ark for the Aleinu, the bottom of page 282, please rise.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר ראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים מעל, ושכינתו זו וגובהי מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, כך כתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום והשבות אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל ועל הארץ, על הארץ מתחת אהוד. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו
On this Shabbat, we now call to mind, in love and reverence, those recently taken from our midst during the Shloshim, during the past 30 days, Kate Sachs and Blanche Goodwin, twin sister of Norman Rosen. And on this Shabbat, in love and reverence, the Yortzeit, the anniversary of the passing of Murray Brown, father of Cheryl Lucchio, Irma Levine, mother of Enid Alpern, Daniel Alpern, brother of Jerome Alpern, Shirley Beckerman, mother of Eric Beckerman, Iris Lehman, sister of Linda Kowalski, Constance Roberg, wife of Kurt Roberg, Mosek Leisure Rosenzweig, father of Betty Rosenzweig Hayes, Rudy Schwartz, husband of Barbara Schwartz, my father. For all those close to our hearts and for all those for whom there may be no one to say Kaddish, we join in the Kaddish prayer, page 294. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba, be'alma divrach hirutei v'amlich malchutei, b'hayechon uvyomechon uv'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'zman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehi shmei Rabba mevorach le'olam olamei almaya. Yitbarak v'yishtabak v'yitpa'ar v'yitraman v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal shemed kudisha brichu. Le'ela min kol birhata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechamata da'amiran be'alma v'imru Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya. V'hayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved. Amen. Please be seated. Dylan Priblo is up and running as part of our live stream team, and we thank him this evening. Michael Fishbein is also in the house, and his birthday was yesterday, so we extend birthday wishes to Michael. Torah study tomorrow morning is at 10 a.m. as we devote a second week to looking at the legacy of King Solomon. And do apologize that the usual link for Torah study was missing from our weekly announcement. It's the same link every week. So you have two choices. You could go back to last week's announcement and find it, or you can email me and I will send you that link so that everybody who would like to join in Torah study may do so. However, there's no religious school on Sunday for the President's Day weekend, and religious school will resume a week from Sunday in person once again. Our Shabbat service will conclude with a rendition of Adon Olam from somebody who, was she born in the 1980s?
Born in the 80s.
Born in the 80s. Her name is Iris Karlin.
And this is dedicated, in honor of President Day, to our own president, Michael Friedman, the birthday boy.
How nice.
You can join me. The words are on page 321, Adon Olam. Adon Olam, Hashem
Shabbat Shalom.